Good evening students, and today I am discuss about the important chapter in the plant kingdom, that is the life cycles. So what are the plant life cycles is present here? The one is called as Diplontic life cycle. Look into here. This is a Diplontic life cycle or Diplontic life cycles. So this life cycles, they will give one matching question in your NEET previous papers. And see that what is Diplontic stage. In the case of Diplontic stage, look here, that is the main dominant stage. Diplontic means the dominant phase is the gametophyte. So the life cycle is Diplontic. The main plant body is, look that, the main plant body is Diplontic. Like the main plant body is gametophyte. The gametophyte is a main plant body. It is a multicellular and is an independent one and a dominant one, and it is a photosynthetic and autotrophic. So see that in the case of Diplontic life cycle, the main that is a dominant phases, that is a gametophytic phase. So the next one is called here, what is the dominant phases? The gametophytic phase. This is a multicellular, independent, photosynthetic and dominant one. In the case of Diplontic life cycle, which is a dominant one, the dominant phase is gametophytic, which is independent and photosynthetic is gametophyte. The next is here is, it produces the gametes. So the gametes producing is called as gametophyte. The gametes producing stage is called as gametophyte. The next stage is called as, in the Diplontic stage, the sporophytic phase is represented by only zygote, diploid zygote only. So the next one is the sporophytic generation is represented by only diploid zygote. In which Diplontic, in which type of life cycle? That is Diplontic life cycle. So they are asking two questions here. In which type of life cycle the sporophytic generation is represented by a diploid zygote only? That is a Diplontic life cycle. Is Diplontic life cycle. In which type of Diplontic life cycle the gametophyte is a dominant one, the gametophyte is an independent one, the gametophyte is a photosynthetic one, the gametophyte is a autotrophic one. That is called as Diplontic life cycle. They are asking two questions here. See that, and here is the meiosis occurs in the zygote. It produces haploid spores, and haploid spores again divide mitotically to form gametophyte. So look into picture of the life cycle of Diplontic. You can see here, you go through the life cycle here. See that this is a Diplontic life cycle. Look here. So the dominant phase is the green one, is the complete green one is dominant one. The dominant phase is gametophyte. A haploid gametophyte is a dominant one. It's a multicellular, independent and photosynthetic. So in the case of Diplontic life cycle, the dominant one is a gametophyte. The gametophyte is undergoes gametes. It gives rise to gametes. The male gamete and fuse, that is female gamete, give rise to zygote. So the zygote is undergoes, here is meiosis, it give rise to spores and it give rise to the gametophyte. So here is the sporophytic stage is the only zygote only. The sporophytic stage is the only zygote. See that. This is the Diplontic life cycle. So here is the sporophyte is represented by only zygote. The sporophyte is represented by only diploid zygote. We are keep in mind there are two things are there in the case of Diplontic life cycle. The dominant phase is gametophyte. So the gametophyte is, which is the case of Diplontic life cycle, the gametophyte is an independent and dominant one, and is a photosynthetic and autotrophic. And what about the sporophytic? The sporophytic phase is represented by only a diploid zygote. Only a diploid zygote. See that this is a diploid one, 2n. So that is in the case of Diplontic life cycle. And what are the examples for haplontic life cycle? See that is mostly all algae are haplontic. So mostly all algae are haplontic. See that the next one. Here is next one. So what are the examples for haplontic life cycle is seen in most of the algae. The most of the algal members and the volvox, Spirogyra, and some members of chlamydomonas, some species of chlamydomonas. So the mostly algae, here is algae, the most of the algae are haplontic. Mostly algae are haplontic life cycle. So the algae are haplontic life cycle. The algae are haplontic life cycle. For example, volvox, and here the Spirogyra and volvox. And is also some members of chlamydomonas, they show haplontic life cycle. They are asking MCQ question. The haplontic life cycle is found in volvox, Spirogyra, and some members of chlamydomonas. A is that is called as haplontic life cycle is found in mostly algae. B is that is volvox and Spirogyra. C is chlamydomonas, and D is all of the above. All of the above. The next one is here, and after that here is the one more cycle is called as diplontic. So what is diplontic? Which phase is dominant in the case of diplontic life cycle? Which phase is dominant in the case of diplontic life cycle is the main phase is sporophytic generation is a dominant one. So the main plant body is sporophytic is a dominant one, and the multicellular, independent, photosynthetic and the dominant one. They are asking the question, in diplontic life cycle, which phase is a dominant sporophyte? Which phase is independent sporophyte? Which phase is photosynthetic? That is called as sporophytic. So here is the gametophytic generation is represented by 1 to few celled stage. In which type of life cycle the gametophytic generation is represented by 1 to few celled stages? Diplontic life cycle. Diplontic life cycle. It is present in gymnosperms and angiosperms. The gymnosperms and angiosperms. See that. Here is the gymnosperms and angiosperms is there are seeded plants. All seeded plants are having that is diplontic life cycle. All seeded plants means gymnosperms and that is angiosperms. All seeded plants, that is phanidogams. The next is in the case of algae, that is fucus. That is some algae that is called as fucus. See that. Here is fucus. The fucus is having a diplontic life cycle. So in the case of algae, the example of fucus is having the diplontic life cycle. So in the case of diplontic life cycle, which phase is dominant? Sporophytic phase is dominant, whereas gametophytic phase is 1 to few cell thickness, the 1 to few cell stage. In the case of diplontic life cycle, which phase is dominant is sporophytic, which phase is independent and photosynthetic and autotrophic is, that is sporophytic phase. The diplontic phase is found in A, fucus, B is gymnosperms, and the C is angiosperms, and D is all of the above. All of the above is the answer. So there are always that is diplontic life cycle is present in the case of all seeded plants and phanidogams and also some algae, that is a fucus. The fucus is having diplontic life cycle. Angiosperms is having diplontic life cycle. In the case of that is gymnosperms having that is diplontic life cycle. So all seeded plants having diplontic life cycle. The next one is haplodiplontic. The name is haplodiplontic. So haplodiplontic means which phase is here is, this is intermediate of about 2. So haplodiplontic means haploid stage. The gametophytic stage is alternates with the diploid stage. So this is an intermediate of about 2. So here the both gametophytic generation and sporophytic generations are present, but in the case of here is the both gametophyte and sporophytes are dominant and multicellular, but they differ in their dominancy. Both gametophyte sporophyte is multicellular in the case of haplodiplontic life cycle, but they differ in dominancy. In the case of bryophytes, which stage is dominant? Gametophyte. In the case of pteridophytes, the sporophytic stage is dominant. Looking here. In the case of bryophytes, the dominant stage is gametophyte. In the case of pteridophytes, the dominant stage is, see here, in the case of pteridophyte, the dominant stage is sporophyte. So all bryophytes and all pteridophytes is having a haplodiplontic stage. So in the case of haplodiplontic means the haploid gametophyte is alternates with the diploid sporophyte. So in the case of haplodiplontic life cycle, there is an alternation of generations. The gametophyte is alternates with the diploid sporophyte. So this haplodiplontic life cycle is also present in some algae, Ectocarpus, Laminaria, and also culps. It is present in algae also. Ectocarpus, Polysiphonia, culps. The culps is, see that, Laminaria. So in this case, the haplodiplontic life cycle, you can see that in the picture of life cycles. So the next one is called as Diplontic life cycle. See here, look into the picture. The pink color is a dominant one. The dominant stage in the diplontic life cycle is sporophytic stage. Sporophyte is a diploid one. It's a zygote is a diploid one. So the dominant phase is here is a diploid zygote. So here is the dominant, the life cycle is diplontic life cycle. Why it becomes diplontic means the sporophytic stage is dominant. And see that the gametophyte is here producing gametes producing stage. It is a limited one only, a few celled or one to few celled. That is in the case of a diplontic life cycle. And look into the next one is haplodiplontic. Haplodiplontic means haploid gametophyte is alternates with diploid sporophyte. Look that. So this green color completely one is a gametophyte is a dominant one. Look that. This gametophyte is a dominant one. The gametophyte is alternate with a pink color of the sporophyte. This is a diploid one. So the haploid gametophyte, look that, is alternates with a diploid sporophyte. The life cycle is haplo means gametophyte is haploid. Diplontic means sporophyte is diploid. So the gametophyte is alternates with the diploid sporophyte. Hence the life cycle is called as haplodiplontic life cycle.